There was this freedom the little guys were always getting killed for. Was it freedom from another country? Freedom from work or disease or death? Freedom from your mother-in-law? Please, mister, give us a bill of sale on this freedom before we go out and get killed. Give us a bill of sale drawn up plainly so we know in advance what we're getting killed for. So we can be sure, after we've won your war, that we've got the same kind of freedom we bargained for. Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Trumbo. This book is metal as and not just because it's about a guy getting his arms and legs blown off, or because it was the source material for Metallica's One. It's because this book helped fuel a conversation that heavy metal has been having for the last 50 years. Now, we've all heard the argument that heavy metal and politics don't go together, and I do understand the desire for metal to purely be a form of escapism. Political fatigue is real, and as the great philosopher Arthur Fleck once said, is it just me or is it getting crazier out there? Why, yes, Joker. Yes, it is. But anyone who really thinks politics and metal don't go together, well,
wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong.
Here's the reality. Metal is not inherently conservative or liberal, centrist or radical. But when metal does get political, it is very frequently anti-war. And that is where metal and politics intersect. Like the devil and like horror, anti-war themes in heavy metal began with Black Sabbath. In the lyrics, generals gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses. But War Pigs is about more than just rhyming masses with masses. It criticizes the military-industrial complex and America's ulterior motives to fight the Vietnam War. In an interview with Metal Hammer, Geezer Butler recalled, the president, Lyndon Johnson's wife, Lady Bird Johnson, had this road building company. The Americans would go in and bomb all these roads in Vietnam. Then her company would go in and rebuild them and get the money. They weren't saying all that in America. We wrote War Pigs because many American bands were frightened to mention anything about the war, so we thought we'd tell it like it is. That company was called Brown and Root, but its nickname was Burn and Loot, as a reference to war profiteering. Brown and Root heavily financed Lyndon Johnson's political career, thus Lady Bird owning the company. Brown and Root landed part of a $380 million contract thanks to the war effort, but that money didn't all go to LBJ. It went to the real owners of that company, Halliburton, the good people who brought you the war in Iraq. That makes it sound like we haven't learned our lesson. You know who else told it like it was? Dave Mustaine. Peace Sells also addresses the military-industrial complex and how the government has a vested interest in endless war to make endless profit. After much research, we also discovered that Holy Wars is about wars, namely the conflict between Catholics and Protestants in Ireland. And of course, you've got Ashes in Your Mouth, Rust in Peace Polaris, Gears of War, and other classic Megadeth anti-war anthems. In fact, thrash has long been metal's go-to subgenre for songs about political conflict. Sacred Reich and Evil Dead protested environmental destruction in the late 1980s. Sodom's Ancient Orange is a deep look into the horrors of Vietnam, and Sepultura raised awareness for indigenous rights while dissecting the sins of colonialism.
What's special about you guys also is that you're really affected by what's happening in the world. A lot of people are just affected by what's happening in their courtyard or in their own city, but you seem to be affected by wars and by problems in other countries. How would you explain it?
It's very important, because if a war happens today, everything is gone. Every border is going to be closed, and we're very concerned about what's going on in our planet too. We want to make our family, put some kids in the war and stuff. So we like to talk about what things were going on today, and to start thinking about to do better ways and better places and stuff, for ourselves and our families and stuff, and our fans too, everybody.
And unlike most metal bands who write about war from faraway places, Sepultura created classic anthems like Refuse Resist right in the heart of violent political chaos. Now, if you're a part of the listen to metal and the devil will make you kill your mom crowd, plenty of thrash bands like Slayer, Creator, and Destruction seem to be celebrating war rather than protesting it. But no metal band in existence, not Sabaton, not Brujeria, not Iron Maiden, actually wants or likes war. Maybe Amon Amarth. Probably. Definitely Amon Amarth. And Gwar, obviously. One of metal's quintessential anti-war acts is Napalm Death, whose name itself is a brutal message against chemical weaponry. Napalm Death is still one of the planet's most politically active bands, concerning both human and animal rights. They do practice what they preach as well, with vocalist Barney Greenway being a vegetarian since he was 14, he's now a vegan, and actually facing off with neo-Nazis in apartheid-era South Africa.
And so I was doing national radio, like big shows down there, you know.
Yeah.
And of course I was talking about equality and, you know, what everything should be a level playing field for everybody, you know. And then of course you still had a lot of the Boer Afrikaans who just were not having any of that, you know what I mean? And so I'd be on these talk shows in South Africa and people would be phoning the show saying, if you walk out of that studio, boy, you're going to get stabbed, you know what I mean? Just watch your back when you walk out, you know? And of course, you know, me being quite young, and so I was like, off, like, you know, and we were just turned into a slanging match, you know?
Yeah.
And then we had a couple of incidents to where we did a couple of record signings, and these like Afrikaans guys would show up, like huge guys with like brown shirts with like swastika arm, and they'd just stand at the back of the shop just to make a point, you know, to send a message or whatever.
We should also mention South Africa's Retribution Denied, who spoke out against the corruption of apartheid in their home country. I also need to note National Socialist black metal, as it's existed in the scene for 30 years now. Unfortunately, the prevalence of this genre, though it remains relatively unpopular, does help prove that metal can be a natural medium for politics. But in the interest of not promoting any sort of ethnic nationalism or supremacy, I'll leave it at that. A new age of anti-war acts came in the post-9/11 era, namely with System of a Down's monumental BYOB, or Bring Your Own Bombs. It was probably the first time since Rage Against the Machine that a political band was so prominent. While in the underground, Lamb of God made their own statement with As the Palaces Burn. Slayer even won a Grammy for their anti-war cut Eyes of the Insane, a song that addressed the epidemic of veteran suicides, which we still face today. And look, we as Americans learned our lesson, fully withdrawing from Iraq in 2011, and everything has been A-OK ever since. 15 years after invading the Middle East, again, we can at least reflect on the truth. That there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and that Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with the 9/11 attacks. Truth is power, my friends, and in this era of extreme division, let's come together and agree with our heavy metal forefathers on one sacred principle, that war should never be waged for the sake of profit, and our kids should never be sent overseas on the back of a government conspiracy. Whew. It feels really good to agree on something for once. In fact, in 2018, when a new poll was taken, the number of Americans who still thought invading Iraq was the right decision was just 43%. Are you f***ing kidding me? And that brings us to genocide. Like System of a Down and Judas Priest before them, Havoc used metal to discuss the history of genocide, rightly naming the horrific practice as worse than war. But don't worry, because these days, concentration camps hardly even exist, just in places like China, India, and Russia. You know, the small, insignificant countries. I'm not feeling good about this. Okay, almost done. Things continue to be fine and good. Everything is okay, and Body Count made a great record, and Megadeth's Dystopia surely isn't a mirror image of our inevitable future, and Cattle Decap were probably just exaggerating with all those climate change records, all 7 of them, and Gojira and Architects, they were just joking about the whales, and Meshuggah were wrong about the machines taking over, as I read this off a computer screen. All right, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I'm going home, and you guys are gonna call me when everything is okay and gets better. I'm smoking a bowl and burying myself in my goddamn bed!